The silence at our dinner table felt thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched Jonas methodically cutting his chicken, each slice precise and deliberate, while our 8-year-old daughter, Rowan, pushed peas around her plate. His parents, Marianne and Ben, had joined us for what I'd hoped would be a normal family dinner, but the tension was suffocating. I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of my secret had been crushing me for weeks, and I'd finally decided that honesty was the only way forward. Maybe if Jonas understood why I'd grown close to Callum, he'd realize his own role in our marital problems. "Jonas," I said, setting down my fork with more force than necessary, "we need to talk." He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine with that same distant expression he'd worn for months. "About what, Ethelyn? About us? About our marriage?" I glanced at Rowan, then at Marianne and Ben. "About why I've been so unhappy." Marianne's eyebrows rose slightly. She'd always been perceptive, that woman. Too perceptive for my comfort. "Mummy, are you sad?" Rowan's innocent voice cut through the tension. "No, sweetheart. Mummy just needs to have an adult conversation with Daddy." I reached over and smoothed her hair. "Why don't you go wash up for dessert?" After Rowan left the room, I took a deep breath. This was it. Time to clear the air and force Jonas to confront his own shortcomings. "I need to tell you something," I began, my voice trembling slightly. I've developed feelings for someone else." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Ben's fork clattered against his plate. Marianne's lips pressed into a thin line. Jonas just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "It's Callum," I continued, rushing to explain before anyone could react. "Your old friend from college. We've been talking, and he's been so supportive during this difficult time in our marriage." "Difficult time?" Jonas's voice was eerily calm. "What difficult time would that be?" I felt my cheeks flush. "Don't act like you don't know. You've been so cold, so distant, working all hours in that office of yours, barely speaking to me. Callum listens to me, Jonas. He makes me feel valued." "So you had an affair?" It wasn't a question. "It wasn't an affair," I protested, hating how defensive I sounded. "It was emotional support, something I wasn't getting at home." Marianne made a small sound of disgust, but I ignored her. This was about Jonas and me. "I'm telling you this because I don't want secrets between us," I continued, leaning forward earnestly. "I want us to work through this. I want you to understand why I needed someone else's attention." Jonas studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I see." That was it? Just "I see"? I'd expected anger, hurt, maybe even relief that we were finally addressing our problems. Instead, he seemed almost prepared. "Is that all you have to say?" I demanded. "What would you like me to say, Ethelyn?" "I'd like you to acknowledge your part in this. I'd like you to recognize that your neglect pushed me towards someone who actually cares about my feelings." Ben cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Maybe we should go, Marianne." "No," Jonas said quietly. "Stay. I think it's important that family hears this." Something in his tone made my stomach clench, but I pressed on. "I'm being honest with you, Jonas. I'm being brave enough to admit that I've been unhappy, that I've found comfort elsewhere. The least you could do is apologize for making me feel so alone in this marriage." Jonas set down his napkin and stood up. "Excuse me for a moment." He disappeared into his home office, leaving me sitting with his parents in awkward silence. Marianne's disapproving stare felt like a physical weight. "Ethelyn," Ben said gently, "maybe you should think about what you're saying." "I'm trying to save my marriage," I snapped. "I'm trying to be honest about our problems." "By admitting you cheated on our son." Marianne's voice was ice cold. "I didn't cheat. It was emotional support. There's a difference." When Jonas returned, he was carrying a manila envelope. He sat back down and placed it on the table between us, his movements deliberate and calm. "What's that?" I asked, though something deep in my gut already knew. Without a word, he opened the envelope and withdrew a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward me. My blood turned to ice as I recognized my own words, printed in black and white. From ethelyn.morcantegmail.com to callum.ferris.financialplanning.com. Subject: Last night was perfect date, March 15th, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Callum, I can't stop thinking about last night. The way you held me, the way you made me feel so alive again. Jonas has no idea what he's missing. When you kissed me goodbye at your apartment, I felt like myself for the first time in years. I know this is complicated, but I need you to know that what we have is real. More real than anything I've felt with Jonas in a long time. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. All my love, A. The paper trembled in my hands as the full implications hit me. He knew. He'd known all along. How did you... I whispered. Your email account syncs to the family tablet, Jonas said quietly. The one we all use. You forgot to log out after checking your messages last week. My mouth went dry. Jonas, I can explain. Can you? His voice remained steady, controlled. Because that email is dated 2 weeks ago, and according to this, it wasn't just emotional support, was it? I looked around the table desperately. Ben was staring at his hands. Marianne was watching me with undisguised contempt. And Jonas looked like a stranger. This isn't what it looks like, I said weakly. It looks like you lied to my face 30 seconds ago, Jonas replied. It looks like you tried to gaslight me into believing this was my fault. It looks like you had a physical affair with my friend and then had the audacity to sit at our dinner table and blame me for your choices. The room was spinning. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to confess. He was supposed to apologize for neglecting me, and we were supposed to work through our problems together. I was going to tell you everything, I stammered. I wanted you to understand the context first. The context. Jonas folded his hands on the table. Let me make sure I understand the context, Ethelyn. You felt neglected, so you started an affair with my friend. Then you decided to confess by lying about the extent of your betrayal and trying to make me feel guilty for your choices. Is that the context? Tears were streaming down my face now. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How is it supposed to happen? I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I'd expected him to crumble. I'd expected him to beg for forgiveness, to promise to be a better husband, to fight for our marriage. Instead, he sat there like a judge pronouncing sentence. Mummy, Rowan's voice came from the doorway. Why are you crying? Jonas immediately stood up. Come here, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are just having a grown-up conversation. As he scooped our daughter into his arms, I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger or hurt or betrayal. It was resolve. The next morning, I couldn't concentrate on anything at work. My hands shook as I tried to type up reports, and I kept replaying the dinner scene over and over in my mind. The way Jonas had looked at me, the calm certainty in his voice, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who would validate my feelings instead of making me feel like a monster. I called my sister Tamsin and asked her to meet me in the break room. She arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and her usual fierce loyalty. You look terrible, she said, pulling up a chair beside me. What happened? I told her everything. The dinner, the confession, the printed email. With each detail, Tamsin's expression grew more outraged. He was spying on you, she said, her voice rising. That's completely unacceptable, Ethelyn. That's controlling behavior. That's what I thought, I said, relief flooding through me. Finally, someone who understood. I mean, yes, I made mistakes, but going through my private emails? That's a violation of trust. It absolutely is. And the way he ambushed you in front of his parents, that's emotional abuse, plain and simple. My coworker Janet looked up from her sandwich. What's emotional abuse? Tamsin launched into the story before I could stop her, painting Jonas as a manipulative control freak who had driven me into another man's arms through neglect and surveillance. He sounds like a narcissist, Janet said, shaking her head. My ex-husband was the same way, always checking up on me, making me feel guilty for having friends. Exactly, Tamsin said. Ethelyn, you need to protect yourself. Men like this don't just stop at emotional abuse. He's not abusive, I protested weakly, though part of me was already embracing their interpretation. He's just hurt. Hurt men don't print out evidence and stage confrontations, Tamsin said firmly. Hurt men have conversations. What Jonas did was calculated and cruel. By the end of lunch, I felt somewhat vindicated. Maybe I had made mistakes, but Jonas's reaction proved that he was the real problem in our marriage. A loving husband would have approached me privately, would have given me a chance to explain. That afternoon, Tamsin posted on Facebook, "Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Supporting my sister through a difficult time." Toxic masculinity, torture, emotional abuse. The post got dozens of likes and supportive comments from friends who didn't know the full story. Reading them made me feel better, more justified in my choices. But when I got home that evening, Jonas was waiting for me with his laptop open. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped. "About what?" He turned the screen toward me. It was a group chat between him, his parents, and his brother David, who lived across the country. Marianne. "I can't believe what we witnessed last night. That woman has no shame." David. "What happened? Jonas won't give me details." Ben. "She admitted to having an affair, then tried to blame Jonas for it, said he was neglectful." Marianne. "It was worse than that. She lied about it being just emotional when Jonas had proof it was physical. Then she had the nerve to demand an apology." David. "Jesus. What are you going to do, Jonas?" Jonas. "I'm talking to a lawyer tomorrow. I need to know my options." Marianne. "Good. That girl has been trouble since day one. I just feel sorry for little Rowan." I stared at the messages, my face burning with shame and anger. "You showed them my private email?" "I showed them evidence of your affair, yes." "You had no right." "I had every right. These are the people who will be affected by the destruction of our family. They deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" I laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you've been a cold, distant husband for years. The truth is that you drove me to seek comfort elsewhere. But I guess that doesn't fit your narrative." Jonas closed the laptop. "What narrative would that be?" "The one where you're the perfect victim and I'm the evil wife. You're already poisoning everyone against me." "I'm not poisoning anyone. I'm simply not covering for you anymore." That phrase hit me like a slap. Covering for me? Do you think I didn't notice the late nights, the secret phone calls, the way you'd jump whenever you got a text? I've been making excuses for your behavior for months, Ethelyn, telling myself you were just stressed, just going through a phase. Then why didn't you say something? Because I hoped you'd come to your senses. I hoped you'd end it on your own and we could move forward. His voice was steady, but I could see the pain in his eyes. I gave you every opportunity to be honest with me. I was honest. Last night I told you. You lied last night. You admitted to having feelings for Callum and tried to frame it as emotional support. Even when you were supposedly coming clean, you were still lying. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I knew he was right. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jonas slept beside me, or pretended to sleep. I couldn't tell anymore. The man I'd married seemed to have been replaced by this cold, calculating stranger who documented my betrayals and shared them with his family. The next morning, I discovered that Rowan had been unusually quiet at breakfast. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked as I packed her lunch. "Lily's mom said you and Daddy might get divorced," she said in a small voice. My blood ran cold. "What?" "At school yesterday, Lily said her mom heard something about it." I knelt down to Rowan's level. "Honey, Daddy and I are just working through some problems." That's what grown-ups do sometimes. But even as I said it, I realized how quickly word was spreading. Jonas's family was talking, which meant their friends were talking, which meant the whole community would soon know about my affair. When I dropped Rowan off at school, I noticed some of the other mothers whispering and looking in my direction. My cheeks burned as I walked back to my car, wondering what version of the story they'd heard. At work, Janet approached me with a concerned expression. "Ethelyn, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay at home? My neighbor mentioned seeing a lot of activity at your house last night." Activity? Cars coming and going. She thought maybe there was some kind of family meeting. I realized Jonas's brother David must have flown in. The family was circling the wagons, and I was on the outside. That afternoon, I tried calling Callum. I needed to hear his voice, needed someone to remind me that what we had was real and worth fighting for. "Hello?" His voice sounded strained. "Callum, it's me. I need to see you." There was a long pause. "Ethelyn, I don't think that's a good idea right now." "Why not? What's wrong?" "Jonas called me." My heart stopped. "He what?" "He called me yesterday, asked me to meet him for coffee." "Oh God, what did you tell him?" I told him the truth, that we'd gotten carried away, that it was a mistake, and that it was over. A mistake? The word felt like a knife in my chest. Is that what I was to you? A mistake? "Ethelyn, please, this is complicated enough. I left my marriage for you. You didn't leave your marriage. You cheated on your husband. There's a difference." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in disbelief. The man who had told me he loved me, who had made me feel alive again, was now treating me like an embarrassing mistake he wanted to forget. I was truly alone. The cafe on 5th Street had always been our place. Callum and I had met there dozens of times over the past few months, sharing coffee and conversation that had gradually turned into something deeper. Now, sitting across from him in our usual corner booth, everything felt different. "You look tired," I said, studying his face. He had dark circles under his eyes and kept glancing toward the windows nervously. "I haven't been sleeping well," he admitted. "This whole situation, it's gotten out of hand, Ethelyn." "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Jonas didn't just call me. He came to my office, sat down with my boss and had a very calm, very professional conversation about personal matters affecting our working relationship." My stomach clenched. What kind of conversation? The kind where he mentioned that I'd been having an affair with his wife, and that he wanted to make sure there were no conflicts of interest since his company sometimes contracts with mine. "He got you in trouble at work?" "He didn't have to. Just the fact that he was there, talking to my boss about my personal life." Callum ran his hands through his hair. "My boss asked me to take some time off while they assess the situation." I reached across the table for his hand, but he pulled away. "Callum, I'm so sorry. I never wanted—" "What did you want, Ethelyn? Really?" The question caught me off guard. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to feel valued and loved and appreciated. "By destroying your marriage?" "My marriage was already destroyed. Jonas had checked out years ago. You know that. I told you how cold he'd become, how distant." Callum was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. "Did you ever think that maybe there were reasons for that?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe Jonas wasn't as oblivious as you thought. Maybe he sensed something was wrong and pulled back to protect himself." I felt like he'd slapped me. "Are you taking his side now?" "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just saying that maybe the situation was more complicated than either of us wanted to admit. So this is my fault. Everything that's happened is because I'm some kind of manipulative monster." "That's not what I said." But it was what he meant. I could see it in his eyes. The same look Jonas had given me at dinner. The look that said I was the problem, the villain in this story. "I need to go," Callum said, standing up abruptly. "Wait." I grabbed his arm. "We need to get our stories straight. People are asking questions and—" "Our stories?" He stared down at me. "Ethelyn, There is no our stories. There's the truth, and then there's whatever version you want to tell people. The truth is that we fell in love. The truth is that we had an affair. You were married. I was lonely after my divorce, and we made bad choices. That's the truth. He walked away without looking back, leaving me sitting alone in our booth, with tears streaming down my face. Through the window, I watched him get into his car and drive away, and I had the sinking feeling that I'd never see him again. That's when I noticed the familiar silver sedan parked across the street, Jonas's car. My blood ran cold as I realized he'd been watching us. How long had he been there? Had he seen me reach for Callum's hand? Had he somehow heard our conversation? I sat frozen for several minutes, afraid to move, afraid to give Jonas any more ammunition against me. When I finally worked up the courage to leave, his car was gone. That evening, the house felt like a battlefield. Jonas was in his office with the door closed, talking quietly on the phone. I could hear the murmur of his voice, but couldn't make out the words. Rowan was in her room, unusually subdued after another difficult day at school. I tried to act normal, making dinner and setting the table as if we were still a functioning family. But when Jonas emerged from his office, the look on his face told me that whatever conversation he'd been having wasn't good news for me. "We need to talk," he said. "About what now?" "About the fact that you met with Callum today despite telling me last night that it was over." My heart pounded. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you're still lying to me." "I wasn't lying. I needed closure." "You needed to coordinate your stories." The accuracy of that statement made me defensive. "I needed to understand why the man who claimed to love me suddenly wants nothing to do with me. Maybe because he realizes what I'm just starting to understand." "Which is what?" Jonas studied me for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was sad rather than angry. "That you're not the woman I married. The woman I married would never have done this to our family. The woman you married was neglected and taken for granted. The woman I married would have talked to me about problems in our marriage instead of running to another man. I tried to talk to you. You were always working, always busy, always—" "When?" The question was sharp. "When did you try to talk to me about problems in our marriage? Give me one specific example." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it, because I couldn't think of one. Not one conversation where I'd sat Jonas down and said I was unhappy, where I'd asked him to spend more time with me or pay more attention to our relationship. "That's what I thought," Jonas said quietly. "Just because I can't remember the exact conversations doesn't mean— It means you're rewriting history to justify your choices." He pulled out his phone. "I've been documenting things, Ethelyn. Dates, times, conversations. Would you like to hear what I found?" "Documenting things?" "January 15th. You came home 3 hours late from book club. When I asked how it went, you said it was fine and went straight to bed. I found out later that book club was cancelled that week." My mouth went dry. "February 3rd. You said you were working late on the Henderson account. I called your office at 8 p.m. to see if you wanted me to pick up dinner. Janet said you'd left at 5:30. Jonas, February 22nd. You said you were going shopping with your sister. I ran into Tamsin at the grocery store. She said she hadn't seen you in weeks." Each date hit me like a physical blow. He'd known for months and said nothing. "Why didn't you confront me?" I whispered. "Because I kept hoping you'd come to your senses. I kept thinking that if I gave you space, if I didn't pressure you, you'd realize what you were throwing away and end it on your own." "So you just watched me lie to you?" "I watched my wife destroy our marriage and hoped she'd remember who she used to be." The sadness in his voice was worse than anger would have been. It made me feel small and ashamed in a way that his printed email hadn't. "Jonas, I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we're going to your parents' house to tell them what's happening. Then we're going to sit down with a mediator and figure out how to move forward." "A mediator? For the divorce proceedings?" The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce? Jonas, we can work through this. Couples recover from affairs all the time. Couples recover from affairs when both people are committed to rebuilding trust. You're still lying to me, Ethelyn. You met with Callum today and tried to hide it. Even now, you're more concerned with managing the narrative than with taking responsibility for your choices. That's not true. But even as I said it, I knew he was right. I was still thinking about how to minimize the damage, how to make people understand my side of the story. Jonas headed toward the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, I did love you. The real you, not the person you've become. I would have done anything to save our marriage if you'd given me the chance. After he left, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the dinner I'd made that no one would eat. Outside, I could hear children playing in the neighborhood, their laughter a stark contrast to the silence in our house. I thought about calling Tamsin, but I already knew what she'd say. She'd tell me Jonas was being unreasonable, that he was trying to control me, that I deserved better. But for the first time, I wondered if she was wrong. Maybe I was the one who was unreasonable. Maybe I was the one who had destroyed something precious and irreplaceable. Maybe Jonas was right to want a divorce. Marianne and Ben's living room had always been a place of warmth and family gatherings, but tonight it felt like a courtroom. Jonas sat beside me on the familiar floral couch, but there might as well have been an ocean between us. His parents occupied their matching recliners, and the tension in the air was suffocating. "Thank you both for coming," Marianne said, though her tone suggested this was anything but a social visit. "Jonas called and said you had something important to discuss." I looked at Jonas, hoping he'd take the lead, but he simply nodded at me. "Go ahead, Ethelyn. Tell them." My mouth felt dry as sandpaper. "Well, as you know from the other night, Jonas and I are having some marital difficulties." "Marital difficulties?" Ben's voice was flat. "Is that what we're calling adultery now?" The word hung in the air like a curse. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger. "It's more complicated than that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Our marriage has been struggling for a long time. We've grown apart, and I made some poor choices." "You had an affair with Jonas's friend," Marianne said bluntly. "Let's not dance around it." "Yes," I admitted. "I developed feelings for Callum, and things went too far. But it wasn't something I planned. It just happened." "Affairs don't just happen," Marianne replied coldly. "They're a series of choices, a series of betrayals." I felt my defensive walls going up. "I understand you're upset, but you don't know what it's been like for me. Jonas has been so distant, so focused on work. I felt invisible in my own marriage." "So you decided to make yourself visible to another man." Ben's disappointment was evident in every word. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would listen to me. Callum was there for me when Jonas wasn't. Jonas finally spoke, his voice eerily calm. "I've been thinking about that, actually. About all the times you said I wasn't there for you." He pulled out a small notebook and my heart sank. More documentation. "December 10th last year," he read. "You said you wanted to talk about us feeling disconnected. I suggested we go away for the weekend, just the two of us. You said you were too busy with work." "Jonas, January 22nd. I planned a surprise date night, arranged for Mum to watch Rowan, made reservations at that Italian place you love. You cancelled because Tamsin was having a crisis. She was going through a breakup. March 1st, I suggested we start couples counselling. You said therapy was for people who couldn't solve their own problems." Each entry felt like a nail in my coffin. I could see Marianne and Ben's expressions growing colder with every word. "You're cherry-picking," I protested. "You're only remembering the times I said no, not all the times you were unavailable." "Really?" Jonas flipped through more pages. "Because I also documented my work schedule, my time with Rowan, and every social event we attended together. Would you like me to go through those too?" "This is ridiculous. You can't just reduce our marriage to a bunch of notes in a book." "You're right," Jonas said, closing the notebook. Our marriage was much more than that. It was trust and commitment and partnership. All things you threw away. I made a mistake. The words came out louder than I intended. I'm human, Jonas. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. But you're acting like I'm some kind of monster. Are you sorry? Marianne's question was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're still trying to justify what you did. I'm trying to help you understand. Understand what? That you betrayed your husband and destroyed your family because you felt neglected. Marianne leaned forward in her chair. Do you have any idea how many marriages go through difficult periods? How many couples work through problems without cheating? You don't understand what it was like. I understand perfectly, Marianne snapped. I understand that you're a selfish woman who destroyed a good man's trust because you couldn't be bothered to work on your marriage. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you've done to Jonas and Rowan. What's not fair is that our granddaughter is suffering because of your choices. At the mention of Rowan, I felt tears spring to my eyes. I never wanted to hurt Rowan. But you did, Ben said quietly. She came home from school crying yesterday because the other kids are talking about her parents getting divorced. We haven't decided. Yes, we have. Jonas's voice cut through my protest. I've filed for divorce, Ethelyn. The papers will be served next week. The room spun around me. You what? I've also filed for temporary custody of Rowan pending the final hearing. You can't do that. She's my daughter, too. A daughter you put at risk with your reckless behavior. Jonas's voice remained steady, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Do you realize that Callum has been to our house? That he's met Rowan? You brought your affair partner into our family home. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Ethelyn? Because I have receipts from restaurants where you took him, hotel charges on our credit card, text messages planning meetings while I was at work and Rowan was at school. My blood ran cold. You went through our credit card statements. Our statements, for our joint account, the account you used to fund your affair. I never used our money for... Jonas pulled out his phone and began reading. Chez Laurent, February 14th, $147. The Marriott Downtown, March 3rd, $189. Victoria's Secret, March 10th, $93. Each charge felt like a slap in the face. I remembered those purchases, remembered how excited I'd felt buying lingerie for Callum, how romantic that hotel afternoon had been. You spent our money on him, Ben said, his voice heavy with disgust. It wasn't about the money. It was about everything. Marianne stood up abruptly. It was about trust and respect and commitment. It was about the vows you made to our son and the family you created together. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? Marianne's voice rose. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. This was a calculated betrayal that went on for months. You don't understand what my marriage was like. I understand that you're still making excuses. Marianne was fully angry now. Even now, sitting here with the evidence of your betrayal laid out in front of you, you're still trying to blame Jonas. I'm not blaming him, I'm trying to explain. There is no explanation that justifies what you did. Ben's quiet voice somehow carried more weight than Marianne's anger. There is no excuse for breaking your family apart. I looked around the room desperately, searching for some sign of sympathy or understanding, but found none. Even Jonas, who had loved me for over a decade, looked at me like I was a stranger. I want to save our marriage, I said, my voice breaking. Jonas, please. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. I'll do anything. It's too late for that, Jonas replied. You had months to work on our marriage. Instead, you chose to work on your relationship with Callum. But I'm choosing you now. I'm choosing our family. You're choosing damage control, Jonas said sadly. You're not sorry you had the affair, Ethelyn. You're sorry you got caught. The truth of that statement hit me like a physical blow, because deep down I knew he was right. If he hadn't found that email, I would still be seeing Callum. I would still be lying to him every day. The custody hearing is next Friday, Jonas continued. I suggest you get a lawyer. Jonas, please. This conversation is over. He stood up and I realized with horror that he was leaving me here alone with his parents. Where are you going? To pick up Rowan from Tamsin's. She's been staying there while we figured out how to handle this situation. She's been at Tamsin's? For how long? 3 days. I didn't want her to witness any more of this than she already has. After Jonas left, the silence in the room was deafening. Marianne and Ben sat staring at me like I was something unpleasant they'd found on their shoe. I hope you're satisfied, Marianne finally said. Satisfied. You've destroyed a good man, broken up a family, and traumatized your own daughter. I hope whatever you got from that affair was worth it. I wanted to defend myself, to make them understand that I wasn't the villain in this story. But looking at their faces, I realized that maybe I was. Maybe I had been all along.